Hey everybody, Lisa Sabaniak here from lifelikeyoumeanit.com, and I'm coming to you live. I'm going to actually try to come live every day through the week to talk about a different chapter of my book, Survivor to Warrior, You Can Change Your Life. Got a copy here. Doo, doo, doo. Okay. So that we can get some greater insights into the chapters for those of you who have read the book, and for those who haven't, for you to get an idea and understanding about where I'm coming from, right? Because a lot of you find your way to me because I'm speaking about something that you resonate with. But maybe you don't know my whole story, or maybe you catch me talking about business when you come in and you don't realize that I've got this whole spiritual side, or vice versa. So I thought we'll go through each of the chapters of the book and we'll just talk a little bit more in depth about them. So the very first chapter of the book is my story. So there's enough out there that goes into detail about my story. So I'm not going to go and use this episode to talk about that. But essentially, if you don't know, I am a survivor of 10 years of child abuse from the time I was 2 until I was 12. And so that had an obvious great effect on me. And even after we found safety from that situation, I still ended up abusing myself, really, because the mantra that I had in my head was from my abuser telling me every day that I was ugly, stupid, worthless, and useless. So I had a real sense of belief in those words, and I thought that really was my truth, along with, nobody's ever going to love me. I'm never going to make anything of myself. And so in my late teens, I was actually suicidal and lived a very different life from what I live now. So don't mind the doggies in the background. So I came from a real place of struggle, right? I loathed myself to the core. And I was angry, as you can imagine. I know a lot of people relate to that, even if it's not abuse that we're talking about, any kind of trauma or any kind of sense of injustice, right? That somebody's done something that they shouldn't have done and it's impacted you. And I was in a kind of weird balance of denial that the abuse was actually had anything to do with my present life, because I was trying very, very hard to just pretend it didn't happen. If I never spoke about it, it just would go away, right? And so to try to reconcile rather in my mind that thing that I had pushed aside and not talked about and was just going to forget about was actually impacting the choices I was making now, several years later. That just it just couldn't happen. My mind couldn't handle that. So I was in a state of denial on that front. And on the other side of it, I had this weird anger and absolute refusal, the diabolical refusal to do anything to better my life. And at the heart of it, later on, when I was able to look back at this and really do some hard work to figure out what the heck was going on there, what it really was, honestly and truly, was that I was mad, right? I hadn't done anything wrong. I had been an innocent child who didn't deserve to be treated that way. And yet I was. And because some other person decided they couldn't handle their life and whatever was going on and had to take it out on me and treat me so horribly, I now had a horrible life. And I couldn't wrap my head around why that was my responsibility to fix it. Right? I was mad. Why should I have to go through the effort and all of the work to change my life? I hadn't done anything to put myself here. Surely he's the one that has to fix it, or somebody else. Somebody put me in this state, so somebody else is going to come and just make it all go away. Right? So this weird little balance between the denial that it had any impact on my life whatsoever now, as well as this acute awareness that it was impacting everything in my life, and an absolute refusal to do anything about it out of anger. So that's where we start in my book, in the second chapter, where I am talking about um, what did I actually name this chapter? Let me see exactly what I named this. Meeting our needs. So the first thing that I had to really understand to go about my healing journey in this is my role in my life. I had to figure out how to realize that while he did all of the stuff back then, he wasn't in my life and hadn't been for a lot of years. Where I was now was because of choices I was making. And yeah, I was making those choices based on what had happened to me. That was his fault, but it was my choice. So, meeting your needs is really about starting to have an understanding of why you do the things that you do, why you think the way that you think. Sometimes it's just habit, right? I really thought I was ugly, stupid, worthless, and useless because I heard it over and over and over again by an adult when I was a child, right? Who was supposed to be shaping me into a wonderful, beautiful adult myself, and instead was telling me that. So it kind of became my own habit to say it to myself, this horrible mantra, right? And so then I had to start looking at, well, why was I saying it to myself? Why was I so adamant for a person that I didn't respect at all and had no love for whatsoever? Why was he right? Why was it important to me, as it clearly was, because this was my mantra I was saying to myself a million times a day, every day? Why was it important to me that he be right, that I'm ugly, stupid, worthless, and useless? And so this is where meeting our needs comes into play, because we need to understand that whatever it is we're saying to ourselves or we're doing, the choices that we're making, all of it, they're all serving a need in us. And we all have some very similar needs that are all valid, all completely 100% acceptable. We deserve to be loved, accepted, respected, safe, right? These are all needs that we have, and a million others. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with the need, but we learn as we are growing how to meet those needs in a way that is acceptable in society or in our little bubble at that time. And those needs start to become, and the way that we meet those needs start to become habit. So if we start to meet the need in a negative way, it becomes a habit. And so we don't understand that what we're doing when we're talking down to ourselves, what I was doing when I was repeating that mantra over and over and over again, long after he left and was no longer saying that to me, it was meeting the need for me to feel safe. And I know that that sounds crazy, but stay with me, right? Your little comfort zone is, say, this big. Mine certainly was probably even smaller, this big at that time. And so we feel safe when we're in that comfort zone. And so when we say things to ourselves that we are used to hearing, and it brings about feelings in us that we're used to feeling, that makes us feel familiar. And familiarity is comfortable, and comfortable is safe. Ta-da! So here I was, the first thing that I had to learn is why I was talking to myself this way. Why was I choosing to listen to those words that were playing over and over in my head? Why was I choosing to play them over and over and over in my head? I have a great analogy that I talk about in the book about a child who throws their toys right on the floor, and it's like, ah! screaming and being, completely upset. And then an adult comes along and brings them back their toy, and they're so delighted. Yay! And the second you turn away, they throw it back onto the floor, and you're like, what are you doing? But it's because the child has figured out that, yes, they'll get some pain, but they will also get the elation of getting the toy back. And they've weighed up in their mind which is worse or which is better. And they've decided that it is better to have the pain so that they can feel the elation. And you're going to have my dog start to bark now because the food delivery just got here. So, it's really interesting because that baby growing up, so they've just learned, okay, it's worth the pain to get that joy. I'm willing to go through that pain to get this joy. And then as they start to grow up, people aren't willing to pick up the toy anymore, right? When they're 5, they can pick up their own bloody toy, right? Nobody's going to lean over and pick up the toy. They have to find another way to get the joy, right? So then they go about and they figure out in their bubble what is the best way to get the joy. The joy still needs to be met. The joy isn't the problem. How they go about figuring out how to get the joy is going to depend on their bubble, right? On who is around them and supporting them and loving them and cherishing them or not, right? And so this is normal. We all go through this, right? After we are, 5, 6, 7, and the temper tantrum part of things doesn't work out for us anymore, then we move on to the pouty phase, right? Then we move on to the I hate you and slamming doors phase. And right, we all do it, and usually in pretty regular fashion too, right? Similar ways that we do it. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, is when you come from an abusive background or a traumatic background, then you tend to have really exceptionally poor ways of meeting your needs, as I did, right? Meeting my need to feel safe by telling myself I was ugly, stupid, worthless, and useless. Nobody was ever going to love me and I was never going to be anything in life. What a horrible way to feel safe. But once you start connecting the dots and you start realizing what you're doing to meet the need, that the need is perfectly acceptable, it's the way that you're going about meeting it that is not, you get to now take your power back and decide, how would I like to meet that need? And that's a game changer. I hope that this was helpful. Roz, I see that you were on. Excellent. I'm so glad that you got to watch. Bless everyone. I will try to come back on around this same time tomorrow and talk about the next chapter in Survivor to Warrior.